Hi, I'm Trina with Difference Makers, and today I'm talking with David Stoker from Better Life in Recovery, our August Difference Maker. Hey, how are you?
I'm doing amazing.
Great. I liked when you came into the studio for the radio interview. You are bright, beaming, but life hasn't always been that way for you, and you've made some changes. So, can you kind of take us back and lead us through what has us here today?
I guess my first memory is being molested by a babysitter. Uh, my dad was an alcoholic, or I guess he had an alcohol use disorder, and my mom was my mom, and she got tired of my dad's antics, and the summer before fifth grade, well, it was the first week of fifth grade, she left my dad, dropped us off at her dad's, and she set off to work and try to save up money so that she could get a place for us. And she was a traveling saleswoman with a multiple state area, and she was gone for weeks at a time. I knew things would be different with my grandpa. It was probably about 2 weeks after he'd got us. We were up in his shop, and my dad had a green thumb, but my dad was not mechanically inclined at all. It was sad, really. And that's why I have no mechanical inclination either. I pay people to change my oil, but most women laugh at me. They're like, "I can change my oil," and I'm like, "That's amazing. I can't." So. We were up in my grandpa's shop working on one of his tractors. He asked me to go get one of his tools, and I came back with the wrong tool. And he sent me back, and I came back with the wrong tool again, and he sent me back, and I kind of snickered, and the next thing I know, I woke up with a metallic taste in my mouth, and started looking around. He had a thermos of coffee, and he'd thrown a thermos of coffee, hit me in the back of the head, and I'd hit face first on the concrete floor, knocked myself unconscious, and woke up in a pool of blood. And it was kind of downhill from there. My grandpa was the kind of person that would wake up in the morning and go, "Before this day's over, somebody's getting beat." He would call into to school for a week at a time and say, "Hey, he's helping me on the farm," or "Hey, he's sick," so that I'd have time to heal up before I went to school. Because of that, I never felt like I fit in. I'd moved to Branson. We lived in a little place called Round the Mountain. It was about an hour and a half bus ride one way. I was dressed country, and a lot of the kids I went to school with weren't. They'd been going to school together their entire lives. They weren't being raised by their grandparents. They were being raised by their parents. This is Branson in the mid '80s, and because of that, I mean, I knew they didn't get beat like I did. I knew that they hadn't been molested like I had, and I never felt like I fit in. My dad finally got custody of me the summer before I started the seventh grade. He worked overnights. The first weekend he worked, I went walking. I met a kid on the square. We started talking. We were in the same grade. And that night was the first time I ever smoked marijuana. And it was the first time I ever felt like I really fit in. And it numbed me. And the more I smoked, the less I thought about my past. The next day, I met up with the same kids and we went out and drank, and the exact same thing happened. I felt like I fit in. The more I drank, the number I became, and I really liked being numb and not thinking about my past. I say I was instantly addicted to more, and it went downhill from there. I ended up getting into trouble the summer before my senior year. I got into like mini thins and some things like that, which were kind of over the counter speed, and I moved to back to Missouri with my mom to get away from drugs and trouble the summer before my senior year. When I moved to Branson, I was introduced to methamphetamine, and I ended up dropping out of school. I turned 21 in prison. I, died 3 times in a car accident about a year after I got out of prison, and was on opiates for a little bit over half a year. And when they took me off the opiates, I was dependent on those and started using those too. So, I say altogether, I've died 8 times, 3 times from ODs, 3 times in a car accident, once from alcohol poisoning. And my sister happened to come visit me one day, and I had realized that I was never going to get sober and that my life was never going to change. And she found me unconscious in my bathroom with blood everywhere because I decided to take my own life. So, and here I am. I think the amazing thing, I ended up taking a GED I got in prison, and I've turned it into an associate's degree, 2 bachelor's degrees, a master's degree. I was a counselor working with treatment courts for 8.5 years. Now I am the statewide advocacy and education outreach coordinator for the Missouri Recovery Network. We opened up the Springfield Recovery Community Center, and about 5 years ago, I realized I was part of a recovery community, but I didn't feel like I was part of the community I lived in. And I wanted to figure out ways that I could connect with my community. And that was kind of where Better Life in Recovery was created. I realized that I could do projects like we've painted 11 elementary school playgrounds. We have a stream team. Last year we picked up almost 3 tons of trash out of Missouri riverways. You know, it's finding ways to make people necessary and reconnect. We bowl every Sunday. We play paintball or laser tag once a month. Just positive pro-social activities around positive, sober people.
That's amazing. What clicked in your mind that moment where you realized you could change that around? What did that for you?
That's a big, long story. I was agnostic. I went through a period, like I said, the babysitter that molested me was from my church. My mom and dad went to church, and they would yell and cuss at each other on the way to church. And as soon as they got to church, they would hop out of the car. Hi, brother so-and-so. How you doing? It's a beautiful day, isn't it? And I grew up around a lot of judgmental people. And I grew up around a lot of hypocrisy, and I thought that's what Christianity was. And then because of all the abuse and the neglect and the way people looked at me, I was like, you know, if there's a God out there, he doesn't care about me, why should I care about him? And then my dad took his life, and my drinking at this time I was no longer using other drugs, but I was drinking. And my drinking was really bad, and it got worse because I found something that I couldn't drink the pain away from. About a month after that happened, I broke up with the mother of my son. She wasn't letting me see my son at the time. And I had some friends that I'd worked with for years, Nate and Becca. And, well, I worked with him for years, and Becca was his wife. And one day he's like, you know what, I've never seen you this low. I want to be there for you. He's like, me and Becca would really like it if you go to church with us. And I laughed at him. I'm like, I don't go to church. You were lucky that I came to your wedding because it was in a church. And a couple weeks later, he asked me again, and I laughed at him. And a couple weeks later, his wife came up to me, and she's like, you know, Nate said you're off Sunday, and we're having barbecue and live music after church, and we'd like it if you come hang out. And I don't know where you're seeing me from, but I love food. So I was like, barbecue? I'll come check it out. And the first song that they played was by Third Day. They invited me back. And at the time, I was an alcoholic. I mean, I passed out every single night. If there wasn't an after party somewhere, I had one at my house. And I was in the middle of a practicum working at a treatment center. I was the hypocrite that I never wanted to be. But about 6 months after I started going to church, and I wouldn't go all the time. If I was off on Sunday, so I'd go once or twice a month. And, you know, Nate would always be like, so, drinking the Kool-Aid? And I'd be like, no, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid. But it was kind of neat to hang out with a family that actually cared about me, in spite of me, because I hated myself. And it was nice to be around people that didn't see me the way I saw me. You know, to me, they had that love of Christ, and I hadn't really encountered that before. So, and I got to go to that meeting in the morning and talk about things that were going on. So about 6 months into doing that, I was leaving a bar, and when I left the bar, a police officer pulled out behind me, and I knew a couple things. I knew if he pulled me over, I would get a DUI. I knew if I got a DUI, I would get kicked out of my practicum. I knew if I got kicked out of my practicum, I would get kicked out of grad school. And they say the whole foxhole prayer. I was like, God, if you're real, you let me not get pulled over. I will start going to church every Sunday. No, I think the first one I offered was I'll never drink again. And I turned, and he turned with me. And then I was like, if you let me not get pulled over, I will not I will start never drink again, and I'll start going to church every Sunday. And every time we turned and he turned with me, I added something. By the time I turned onto my street, I was going to give up drinking, smoking cigarettes, cussing, premarital sex, fighting, and I was going to go to church every Sunday. And when I turned onto my street, he kept going forward. So I pulled into my house, pulled into the garage, and I fell asleep in my garage, which is something I would do quite often back then, unfortunately. And the difference was when I woke up in the morning, I actually remembered the night before. And that voice that I've heard so many times was like, really? You're going to quit? Why would you do something just to fail again? And it was Super Bowl Sunday. I had plans to go to a Super Bowl party where everybody drank and everybody smoked, and I was beat. I hopped into a shower and got out of the shower, and I headed to my friend's house, knowing that I was going to drink, knowing that I was going to smoke. And on the way there, a Rolling Stones song came on. Man, I can't stand the Rolling Stones. So I started flipping, trying to find something else. And I came to a dead spot on the radio. And then the music started, and the first words out of the speakers were, I wish you could see me now. I wish I could show you how I'm not who I was. And I heard a voice that I'd never heard before, and it said, pull over, you can do this. Go home. And I did. I pulled over the side of the road, and I bawled. I cried. I couldn't drive because of how hard I was crying. And the station was The Wind. The song was a song by Brandon Heath, I'm Not Who I Was. You know, really cool aside, I've actually had a chance to meet him and to actually share my testimony with him, which was really neat. I got a chance to meet Third Day and share my testimony with them too, which was really cool. Because that song was, there it is, Cry Out to Jesus was a Third Day song. But I didn't end up going. And that was 8.5 years ago. I haven't drank since then. I haven't smoked. I stopped smoking cigarettes after 25 plus years and haven't smoked a cigarette since then. I dated my wife for over a year, and we consummated our relationship on our wedding night just the way that I never envisioned would happen, but the way God's plan is. My wife was amazing, and that was her plan, and that was God's plan, and it became my plan. I've cussed a couple times since. I say progress, not perfection. And, a month later, I met my wife on eHarmony, and we communicated back and forth, and she is this amazing, godly woman, and she makes me want to be better. We had my daughter 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago. It'll be 5 years ago on the 10th of August, 12th of August. Yeah. But man, I've been blessed with one thing after another.
So you're living a better life in recovery, and a lot of people watching might not believe you. So what wise words can you offer to them?
When I chased my thing like nothing else. I say drugs became my God. It was really easy for me to be agnostic because I already had a God. I had something that my entire life centered around. All the times that I went to treatment, I never really committed to anything when I got out. Anytime I tried to get sober, I never committed. Because people like me are wired to not do something halfway. We don't dip our toe in a pool to see what the water's like. We just cannonball right in. I realized that every time I tried to be sober, my heart wasn't in it because I hardly put any time into it. So what I did was I chased recovery the same way that I chased the drug that I used to use. It became the first thing I thought of in the morning. I would think about ways that I could do different or do better the next morning before I go to bed. My spiritual life was a shambles, and my spiritual life now is consistent. We created the Springfield Recovery Community Center, and that's why, we created Better Life and Recovery to begin with. And then, like I said, Better Life and Recovery partnered with New Beginning Sanctuary and Jericho Commission to start the Springfield Recovery Community Center, which now is a brick and mortar place for Better Life and Recovery to operate out of.
Fantastic. Where can folks go for more information?
They can go to www.betterlifeandrecovery.com. My number is 417-268-7489. And if you have somebody that is living with an active substance use disorder and you don't know what to do or where to turn, you can contact me. If you have an active substance use disorder, or if you want to find more positive things to do, or you want to get involved because you have a heart and you have some compassion for people that have substance use disorders or people in recovery, get a hold of us, get involved. We always take volunteers. We do tons of events. We need a lot of help. We have a 5K, 10K coming up. We're in the middle of getting the square for opioid overdose awareness day. We have Recovery Day at Hammond's Field. We have a stream team. We have all these things, and it takes a lot of volunteers, because we're 100% right now self-funded, volunteer only, just like the Springfield Recovery Community Center is 100% self-funded. So donations help, time helps, and if you can't give either of those, prayers help. Just prayer for our success and to give us the ability to continue impacting the community for Christ.
Thank you very much, David. Better Life in Recovery for Difference Makers.